Chapter 1. The Perfect Life We Built. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, turning the granite countertop into a mirror of gold. I stood there with my coffee mug, the faint hum of the espresso machine filling the silence between my children's voices. The house was alive, laughter, footsteps, the familiar chaos of another weekday morning. It was the sound of a life I had fought hard to build. "Dad, where's my math binder?" Connor shouted from the dining room, his voice cracking like it still hadn't decided if it belonged to a boy or a young man. "Left side of the counter, under your lunchbox," I called back, glancing at my watch. "And don't forget your cleats. You've got practice after school." He appeared a second later, all energy and impatience. "Thanks, Dad." "Love you," he blurted, grabbing the binder and sprinting out before I could reply. Madison came next, calm, deliberate, every movement precise, just like her mother. She walked in wearing one of those denim jackets she loved, her long dark hair falling perfectly over her shoulders. "Mom said I could take her scarf," she said, twirling once in front of the mirror. I smiled. "If she said you could, I'm not going to argue. You two look too much alike for me to tell who owns what anymore." Madison laughed softly, that same light, melodic sound Rebecca used to make when we were newly married. The resemblance was uncanny. Sometimes when she smiled just so, it was like seeing a younger version of her mother, the woman I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago on a rainy night in D.C., when she was a senator's daughter chasing a law degree, and I was an intelligence officer who thought he'd never find calm again. The scent of lavender and perfume drifted into the kitchen before Rebecca herself appeared. She moved with quiet confidence, in a cream blouse and tailored navy skirt, her hair pinned neatly. "You're going to be late," she said to me, though she didn't look up from her phone. "I've got time," I replied, watching her scroll through emails. "Morning, honey." She gave a distracted smile. "Morning. You've got that investor meeting today, right? The one with the new security contract." "Yeah," I said, sipping my coffee. "If it goes through, it'll put us over $2 million this quarter." "That's great," she murmured, eyes still fixed on the screen. Then, after a pause, she added, "I have lunch with Ethan later. He wants to discuss a new commercial project near the waterfront." "Ethan Morrison?" I asked casually, masking the small jolt I felt. "The real estate guy?" Hum. She nodded, finally meeting my gaze. "He's got good connections with the city board. It could be a good opportunity." I forced a smile. "Well, you always did have the Midas touch." Rebecca smiled back, but there was something faintly distant behind her eyes, a quiet distraction, the kind that had crept into our marriage over the past year. It wasn't coldness, not yet, but a curtain had been drawn between us, thin but noticeable. She checked her watch. "I should get going." "Connor, Madison, car now." The twins grabbed their bags and hurried out, their voices echoing down the hallway. Rebecca slipped her phone in her purse, leaned in, and kissed my cheek, a practiced, polite gesture. "Don't forget dinner tonight. Mom and Dad are expecting us at 7. "How could I forget?" I said with a small laugh. "Your father still owes me a rematch at chess." "He'll remind you of that," she said, almost absently, before stepping into her heels and out the door. I watched her car pull away, the sun reflecting off the hood until it disappeared beyond the gate. Silence settled in. For a moment, I simply stood there, the ticking clock the only sound in the room. I wanted to believe we were still the same couple who used to stay up late laughing over cheap takeout boxes and wild plans about the future. But 15 years of comfort changes a marriage. Success, too, changes the people inside it. I walked into my office, a sun-filled room overlooking the garden. The framed photographs on the shelves told a story of progress, Army medals, the company's first contract plaque, a photo of Rebecca and me cutting the ribbon at the new headquarters. My firm, Reynolds Security Consulting, had grown from a one-man operation in a garage to a 20-employee powerhouse servicing federal contracts, private estates, and corporations. $2.3 million in annual revenue, 15 years of marriage, 2 bright kids. By every measurable standard, I had won at life. And yet, something was missing. I sat behind my desk and stared at a picture of the 4 of us from last Christmas. Rebecca's smile was perfect, but when I looked closer, I saw what I hadn't seen before. The faint distance in her posture, the the slight turn of her body away from mine. It was nothing dramatic, just subtle, enough that only a man who loved her deeply would notice. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my operations manager confirming the day's client meeting. I typed a brief acknowledgement, then leaned back in my chair. Through the glass wall, I could see the backyard, the trimmed hedges, the pool we'd built last summer, the garden lights Rebecca had insisted on installing. Everything gleamed. Everything looked perfect. I tried to shake the uneasy feeling. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Running a security firm meant constant vigilance. Managing risk, predicting threats, all habits that don't fade when you step through your own front door. Still, there were moments when instinct whispered that something didn't fit, like a piece of code subtly rewritten in an otherwise flawless program. That evening, the house came alive again with laughter and the smell of dinner. Rebecca stood at the counter, pouring a glass of white wine while the twins argued over who got to pick the movie. She looked radiant under the kitchen lights, elegant, composed. When she noticed me watching, she smiled. "What?" she asked playfully. "Nothing," I said, grinning. "Just appreciating how lucky I am." She rolled her eyes. "You always say that." "Because it's true." I leaned over, kissed her temple, and breathed in the familiar scent of her perfume. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. We ate together, talked about the kids' school projects, her parents' upcoming fundraiser, the usual domestic rhythm. Afterward, Connor and Madison went upstairs, and Rebecca sat on the couch, scrolling through something on her phone again. I turned on the TV, pretending not to notice the way her screen lit her face. Soft blue light reflected in her eyes. "You've been working a lot with this Ethan guy lately," I said casually. She didn't look up. "He's efficient." "What?" "No reason." I sipped my drink, forcing an easy tone. "Just making conversation." Rebecca smiled faintly. "You worry too much, Carter. Not every man I talk to is some hidden threat." I laughed to practice hollow sound. Old habits die hard. She set her phone aside and looked at me properly for the first time that night. "You don't have to be in control of everything all the time," she said gently. "You can just trust." "I do trust," I said quietly. And at that moment, I believed it, or I wanted to. She nodded, as if that settled the matter, and leaned back against the couch. "Good, because I've got a busy few weeks ahead, and I don't need you worrying over nothing." The conversation drifted into silence. The soft hum of the dishwasher filled the background. I watched her thumb flick idly across her phone screen again, her attention elsewhere. Later, as I turned off the lights and followed her up the stairs, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered that something had changed, something intangible, but real. I ignored it. After all, she was my wife, the mother of my children, the woman I'd built everything for. Our life was perfect. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Chapter 2, The Partner and the Distance. The first time I met Ethan Morrison, he was standing in my living room with a glass of wine in his hand, laughing like he'd lived there for years. It was a Friday evening, one of those informal dinner gatherings Rebecca loved to host. She'd told me that morning, almost offhandedly, "You'll like him, Carter. He's smart, driven, remind me a little of you when we first met." I didn't think much of it then, but when I walked through the door that night, loosened my tie, and saw this tall, clean-cut man in a tailored suit shaking my son's hand like he was auditioning for Perfect Guest of the Year, something in me bristled. "Carter," Rebecca called, her tone bright and practiced. "Come meet Ethan Morrison, my new business partner." Ethan turned with an easy smile. The famous husband. Finally, we shook hands. His grip was firm but deliberate, the kind that tries to measure another man. "Good to meet you," I said. "Rebecca's mentioned you." "All good things, I hope," he said with a grin that showed just a little too much confidence. Rebecca laughed. "Mostly good." That earned him a chuckle from the guests, but something in her tone, playful, almost flirtatious, made the back of my neck tighten. Throughout dinner, Ethan was the kind of guest who filled the room effortlessly. He complimented the wine, praised Rebecca's cooking, told stories about the real estate market and how people skills were 90% of business. He made everyone laugh, even my kids. Uncle Ethan, Madison called him before dessert was over, which made Rebecca smile like she'd already accepted him into the family circle. I didn't laugh. I watched. I noticed how Ethan leaned just slightly too close when Rebecca showed him the renovation plans on her tablet. How his hand brushed her wrist as he pointed at a design element. How she didn't pull back, not in a way anyone else would notice, but enough that I did. When the guests left and the house quieted, I found her in the kitchen rinsing wine glasses. "Seems like a nice guy," I said casually, leaning against the counter. "He is," she replied, her tone light. "Finally, someone who actually listens to ideas instead of talking over me." I tilted my head. "You saying I don't listen?" She looked up sharply, then softened. "That's not what I meant. You're just used to being in charge, Carter. Ethan's different. Collaborative." The word lingered between us like perfume, faint, sweet, and impossible to ignore. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a name I heard almost daily. Ethan and I are meeting with the zoning board. Ethan wants to see the land in person. Ethan thinks we should rebrand the project. At first, I told myself it was professional. Rebecca was ambitious. I admired that. I'd built my company from the ground up. She deserved to have something of her own, too. But then the late nights started. "Don't wait up," she'd say, kissing my cheek before heading out in that gray blazer she wore for every meeting. Sometimes she came home smelling of wine. Other times, perfume and fatigue. She'd crawl into bed whispering, "It's just work, Carter. Big deals take time." I want to believe her. God, I did. But instinct, that quiet, unrelenting voice honed from years in intelligence, started whispering again. One night, I called her office at 7:30. Her assistant answered. "Oh, Mrs. Reynolds left around 5. She said she had a dinner meeting." "Dinner meeting," I repeated slowly. "With Ethan." A pause. "Yes, I think so, sir." I stared at the phone long after the call ended. The next evening, Ethan showed up at our house unannounced. I found him in the backyard tossing a football with Connor, his easy laughter echoing through the evening air. "Hey, Carter," he called, waving. "Hope you don't mind. Rebecca said I could stop by to drop off some contracts. The kids invited me to throw the ball around." I forced a polite smile. "Sure, why not?" He tossed the ball back to Connor, then turned toward me. "You've got a great family, man. You should be proud." I folded my arms. "I am." Rebecca appeared from the patio door, holding 2 glasses of iced tea. "You boys look like you're having fun." Ethan took a glass from her, fingers brushing hers again. "You make it too easy to relax here," he said with a grin. She laughed softly, eyes flicking to me, just briefly, then back to him. Something in my chest tightened. Dinner that night was quiet. The kids talked about how funny Ethan was, how he promised to take them to see the construction site. Uncle Ethan said he's building something amazing, Madison said. He said maybe we could help paint one of the walls when it's done. Rebecca smiled warmly. He's just being kind. I didn't speak. I just watched my family, my wife laughing at another man's name, my kids glowing when they talked about him, and I felt something shift inside me. A slow, cold fracture. After dinner, I found Rebecca in the study reviewing contracts. "Seems like Ethan's spending a lot of time around here," I said. She didn't look up. "He's part of my project, Carter." "Of course he is." "Yeah, but bringing him home? Letting him play with the kids? That's not business." Her pen stopped mid-sentence. "You're starting to sound paranoid." "I'm just noticing things." She sighed, set the papers aside, and met my eyes. "You've always needed control. Work, family, everything. But this isn't one of your operations, Carter. You can't surveil every move people make." "I'm not surveilling anyone," I said quietly. "I'm just paying attention." Rebecca's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Then pay attention to yourself. You've been distant lately. Cold. Maybe Ethan's just filling the silence you left." That one landed hard. She stood, brushed past me, and went upstairs without another word. The next few weeks blurred together, meetings, school runs, and more mentions of Ethan. He joined our family dinners once or twice a week, always at Rebecca's invitation. He brought wine, told jokes, helped the kids with homework. It was like watching someone slide into the space I'd built with my own hands. At night, I'd lie awake beside Rebecca, listening to her even breathing, wondering when exactly she'd started drifting away and when I'd stopped noticing. One Saturday, I caught Madison scrolling through photos on Rebecca's phone while they were baking. A picture flashed by. Rebecca and Ethan at a restaurant, heads tilted close, smiling. Mom said they were celebrating a deal, Madison said when she caught me looking. Right? I murmured, my stomach sinking. A deal. That evening, as Rebecca packed for another overnight business trip, I stood at the door watching her. Do you ever feel, I asked slowly, like we're growing in two different directions? She froze for half a second before answering. You're imagining things again. Am I? She turned, expression unreadable. Don't do this. Don't ruin what's fine. Fine. The word stung more than anger ever could. She kissed my cheek, the same mechanical kiss she'd given me every morning for months, and walked out. Through the window, I watched her drive away, tail lights glowing red against the dark. Behind me, the house was quiet except for Connor's laughter echoing faintly from the living room. Uncle Ethan's on TV, he called. I didn't answer. I just stood there, staring at the empty driveway, the uneasy truth tightening in my chest like a knot I couldn't untie. Our perfect life was still standing, but I could feel the distance growing inch by inch, and I didn't yet realize how far it would reach. Chapter 3, Discovering the Affair. It began on a quiet Tuesday night, the kind of night that made the silence in our house feel louder than any noise. The twins were asleep, the TV off, and Rebecca had texted an hour earlier. Working late. Don't wait up. I sat at my desk in my home office, the soft hum of my computer filling the air. For months, I've been trying to ignore the gnawing suspicion inside me, telling myself it was paranoia, a leftover instinct from my years in military intelligence. But habits like that don't die. They just wait. My company tested and installed high-end surveillance systems, motion cameras, secure cloud backups, encrypted logs. And though our home was one of the first prototypes I'd ever built, I hadn't checked its archives in months. That night, though, I felt something twist in my gut. Maybe it was the way Rebecca's text ended with a period instead of a heart. Or maybe I'd finally grown tired of lying to myself. I opened the security dashboard. The time-stamped logs scrolled by, normal movement patterns, the kids' bedrooms, the kitchen lights turning off. Then one camera pinged. The guest house by the pool. Movement. 10:43 p.m. Rebecca wasn't supposed to be home. I clicked the feed. The screen flickered, then came into focus, grainy, black and white. The door opened, and there she was. Rebecca. Same blazer she'd worn to meet investors. Only she wasn't alone. Ethan walked in behind her, his hand on her back. They were laughing, too close, too intimate. She turned toward him, said something I couldn't hear, and he leaned in. The kiss wasn't quick or uncertain. It was practiced, familiar. My coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering against the floor. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, frozen, watching the people I loved most betray me in the house I built for them. When they finally disappeared into the guesthouse bedroom, I paused the feed. My chest felt hollow, not burning, not breaking, just empty. Like something inside me had been quietly removed without permission. For several minutes, I couldn't move. Then instinct took over, the part of me trained for reconnaissance, for control. I forced myself to breathe, to think like an analyst, not a husband. Emotion clouds judgment. Information wins wars. I backed up the footage, copied it to an encrypted drive, and tucked it into a safe behind a wall panel. Then I opened a blank log file. A new operation had begun, silent, surgical, and entirely mine. Over the next week, I became someone else, calm on the surface, calculating underneath. Rebecca kept her routine. Early meetings, late nights, polite smiles over breakfast. She'd talk about stress at work or city permits while sipping her coffee, and I'd nod, pretending to listen. I watched her eyes, the way she avoided mine, the subtle guilt hiding beneath mascara and charm. When she left, I'd wait 10 minutes, then pull up her GPS logs. Every company phone had one, a quiet safety feature I'd installed years ago. Private residence. Same address. 2 nights in a row. Ethan's. By Thursday, I had her call logs mirrored. Most were work-related, but the encrypted folder labeled Archive B drew my attention. Hidden inside were deleted voice notes, casual at first, then intimate. You make me feel alive again. Carter stuck in his own world. He doesn't even notice me anymore. Soon, when everything's settled, we'll be free. I listened to those words with a kind of detached horror. My wife, the woman who once promised to grow old with me, now spoke about freedom like our marriage was a prison. I didn't stop there. Emails, texts, financial statements. Patterns emerged. Ethan had transferred small sums of money into a shell company under Rebecca's name, RMW Consulting. Each transaction was just subtle enough to avoid attention, but together, they painted a picture of quiet betrayal. Worse still, buried in their messages was a chilling revelation. Ethan, once he snaps, we can use that. Your mom knows people, judges, custody boards. You'll get everything. Rebecca, he won't. He's too calm, but I'll push him if I have to. Ethan, good. Make him the villain. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the screen. So that was the plan. They weren't just having an affair. They were constructing a narrative, painting me as the abusive, controlling husband, using her mother's influence, Judge Patricia Walsh, to strip me of everything. My house, my business, my children. It wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. The kind of strategy that once got soldiers killed. That night, I watched them again, this time through the guest house camera. Rebecca laughed softly, her hand brushing Ethan's cheek. He kissed her neck. She whispered something I couldn't hear. I muted the audio. I didn't need to hear it anymore. Instead, I studied their movements, timestamps, durations, entrances, exits. Cold data. If I was going to survive this, I couldn't act out of rage. Rage is sloppy. Evidence is clean. At 1:12 a.m., Rebecca slipped back into the main house, moving quietly so she wouldn't wake the kids. She entered our bedroom, set her purse down, and climbed into bed beside me. I didn't move. She rested her head on my shoulder, breathing evenly, as if nothing had happened. My heart pounded, not from love or anger, from restraint, from the sheer effort it took not to turn to her and ask why. But I didn't ask. I let her sleep, memorizing the rhythm of her breathing, the sound of the woman who would destroy me without hesitation. When she drifted off, I whispered to the darkness, "You've made a mistake, Rebecca." The following days became a quiet routine of deception. I smiled when she smiled. I kissed her goodbye each morning. And when she left, I went to work, not at my office, but in secret. Using forensic recovery software, I pulled deleted emails from her laptop. Some were encrypted, others disguised as drafts never sent. Every message added another layer to their conspiracy. Plans to file for divorce, to leak fabricated records of emotional abuse, to claim the kids wanted to stay with her. In one draft, Rebecca had even written a mock statement. I've tried for years, but Carter's temper scares me. The children are afraid. I just want peace. I stared at the text until the words blurred. I couldn't decide which hurt more, that she was leaving or that she wanted to destroy me first. One night, as the rain hammered against the windows, I sat in the dark watching the security feeds again. The flicker of lightning illuminated the guest house, empty this time. Rebecca was home, reading in bed like nothing had changed. I turned to my laptop, reviewing the evidence files. Photos, audio logs, emails, bank transfers. Enough to end them both if I wanted to. But I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about survival. Rebecca thought she was playing chess, but she'd forgotten something fundamental. I'd spent half my life reading lies for a living. And every lie, no matter how well hidden, leaves a footprint. I stared at the frozen image of her on the screen, her hand in Ethan's hair, her lips against his. I felt nothing now. No pain, no fury, just a cold, steady resolve spreading through me like ice. I closed the laptop, the faint echo of thunder following. They wanted to make me the villain. I let them think they were winning. For now. Chapter 4, The Investigation. Rain whispered against the glass that night, the kind of slow, steady drizzle that muffles the world and leaves only the sound of your own breathing. The house was asleep. Rebecca's soft, steady exhale drifted from the other side of the bed. I stared at the ceiling, counting seconds between thunder rumbles, each one tightening something inside my chest. It had been 2 weeks since I discovered the affair. 2 weeks of pretending, of smiling through dinners, of nodding while she spoke about clients and projects. I'd become a ghost in my own home, watching everything, saying nothing. But tonight I wasn't watching, I was hunting. I slipped out of bed quietly, moving like I used on recon missions, slow, measured, soundless. Downstairs, the glow of my laptop lit the darkened office. I'd built a fortress of technology over the years. Data servers, encryption layers, backup systems most hackers couldn't dream of breaking. It was time to use them. I started with the financials. Rebecca and I shared several joint accounts, investment portfolios, property funds, business savings. But something hadn't felt right lately. The balances fluctuated more than expected. I logged into our private banking interface. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, muscle memory guiding each keystroke. The numbers appeared, and my stomach tightened. $340,000 gone, transferred in increments over the past 6 months. Each transfer masked through shell companies, all registered under an umbrella called Morrison Strategic Holdings. Ethan's name. I traced the money through wire logs, routing paths, and digital fingerprints. Each one led offshore. The Cayman Islands, Singapore, Zurich. It wasn't just theft. It was laundering. And Rebecca was listed as a secondary signatory on 2 of the originating accounts. Jesus, Rebecca, I muttered under my breath. The cursor blinked, waiting for the next command. I took a deep breath and kept going. I opened a mirrored copy of her email archives, the ones I'd quietly set to sync every night at 2:00 a.m. Most of the messages were mundane. Updates on her real estate projects, vendors, permit issues. But hidden deep in the archive folder was an encrypted subfolder titled Legal Review. It took me 6 minutes to decrypt it. When the files opened, my blood ran cold. From Patricia Walsh to Rebecca Walsh, subject. Custody considerations. If Carter's mental stability or temper can be documented, even implied, I can pull strings with the county board. Ethan's contacts in family law can ensure favorable recommendations. Appearances are everything. Keep him calm until we're ready. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Her mother, Judge Patricia Walsh, a sitting federal judge, conspiring to weaponize the system against me. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was war. There were more emails, detailed strategies about court optics, asset divisions, and even fabricated reports that would paint me as emotionally distant and volatile. They discussed my military background like it was ammunition. His record shows PTSD indicators. That alone can sway a judge, Patricia had written. He's harmless, Mom, Rebecca had replied. He won't be when we're done, the judge had responded. I read the thread 3 times, each line colder than the last. My hands clenched unconsciously against the desk. They were going to break me legally before I ever knew what hit me. But I wasn't the same man I'd been when I left the Army. I didn't panic. I gathered. I logged. I copied. Every file, every email, every timestamp. The next part was trickier, the deleted files. Rebecca had grown careful lately. Her browsing history was scrubbed daily, and she'd started using encrypted drives. But she forgot one thing. Deleted doesn't mean erased. I used a forensic recovery tool and scanned her laptop. Thousands of fragments appeared, photos, PDFs, hidden archives. Most were irrelevant, but one folder stopped me cold. /private /family archive /inside. Several PDFs bore her mother's name and legal insignia. Case summaries, rulings, and sealed files. But one stood out, a document labeled Walsh Trust Dispute 1999. I opened it. It was a sealed court report involving a fraudulent property trust. Patricia Walsh's father, Senator Raymond Walsh, had funneled millions in undeclared assets through dummy foundations. The fallout had been buried, records sealed under federal confidentiality. But Rebecca's name appeared as the hidden beneficiary. That's when the pieces started falling together. Rebecca's sudden real estate passion, Ethan's involvement in investment management, her mother's desperation to control optics. It wasn't just an affair or manipulation, it was legacy protection. The Walsh family had skeletons to keep buried, and I had accidentally become both a liability and a threat. I stood up, pacing the office, running a hand through my hair. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me like the weight of realization itself. "Son of a bitch," I whispered, almost in disbelief. "This isn't just about money or love. It's power." At 2:37 a.m., I drove to the office. Rain still poured, the roads slick and empty. My reflection in the windshield looked like someone else, colder, harder, determined. Inside the security firm, the servers hummed quietly. I plugged in the external drives, syncing everything I'd gathered, the financial theft, the email conspiracies, the family documents. Each file became a brick in the wall I was building. A wall between them and everything I'd earned. My assistant, Jared, startled me when he entered around 6 o'clock a.m. "Boss, you were early." "Couldn't sleep," I said flatly. He had the stack of drives and folders. "You working another government contract?" "Something like that," I murmured. I didn't tell him that I was preparing for the most personal operation of my life. That evening, Rebecca came home late again. She smelled faintly of wine and rain. "Rough day?" I asked casually, leaning on the counter. She smiled tiredly. "The city delayed permits again. It's exhausting." I nodded. "Ethan helping you through it?" Her expression froze for a fraction of a second, almost imperceptible. Then she laughed. "Don't start that again, Carter. He's a colleague." "Sure," I said softly, holding her gaze. "Just making conversation." The silence between us was thick, suffocating. She shifted, grabbed a bottle of water, and walked toward the hallway. "I'm taking a shower," she muttered. As her footsteps faded upstairs, I whispered, "You should, Rebecca. You're covered in lies." That night, I added one final layer to my operation. I created a secure, hidden vault, both digital and physical. 2 terabytes of evidence, cross-referenced and time-stamped. If anything happened to me, the files would be automatically sent to multiple destinations: the press, the FBI, and a private law firm that owed me a favor. Every betrayal they planned to unleash on me was now a loaded gun in my hands. But I wasn't finished yet. Something about that 1999 trust file haunted me. Rebecca's name wasn't just listed as a beneficiary. It was under a subheading labeled Minor Custodial Recipient. Deferred Inheritance. Sealed under judicial supervision. Deferred inheritance. Supervised by her mother. A long-hidden secret. One that might explain everything. I didn't know what it was yet, but I would. Because now, I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a hunter tracing every scent of deceit back to its source. And the Walsh family had just become my target. Chapter 5, The Buried Secret. The night I uncovered the Walsh family's buried past, I realized there were layers to corruption. Some personal, some political, and some that rotted straight through the soul. The rain had stopped hours ago, but thunder still rolled in the distance, soft and uneven like an echo of the truth I was about to face. I sat in my office, lights dimmed, laptop screen glowing against the darkness. The files I had recovered from Rebecca's deleted archives waited on the screen, unassuming file names, but every one of them smelled like danger. I opened the folder labeled Confidential Close Case 2011. The first document was a police incident report, time-stamped June 14th, 2011. I scanned the lines slowly, each sentence drawing the air from my lungs. At approximately 11:48 p.m., a 2009 Mercedes-Benz E-Class, registered to Timothy Walsh, struck a Toyota minivan traveling eastbound on Route 7. For fatalities, Michael Harper, 38, Lisa Harper, 35, and their 2 children, ages 8 and 5. Driver exhibited signs of intoxication. Back recorded at 0.17. Case later reassigned and sealed. I froze. The Harpers, a family of 4, erased from the earth. I kept scrolling. Attached was a toxicology report, doctored, lines blacked out, timestamps altered. Beneath it, a transfer record. $750,000 moved from an account belonging to the Walsh Family Trust to a law firm called Denton and Pierce LLP, the same firm that handled Rebecca's family matters. Bribes, cover-ups, false reports. And it had worked. There were no news clippings, no charges, no public record. The Harpers were ghosts in the system, buried under the Walsh family's political reach. My pulse hammered in my ears. Timothy Walsh, Rebecca's golden boy brother, was now a financial consultant with a spotless record, a frequent guest at our dinner table, the same man who toasted me at our anniversary party years ago. And all this time, he'd been a murderer. The door creaked upstairs. For a split second, my hand went to the drawer where I kept my Glock. I wasn't in combat anymore, but some habits never died. Carter, Rebecca's sleepy voice drifted down the hallway. Why are you still up? I quickly minimized the files, switching the screen to a bland company spreadsheet. Just finishing a client report, I said. She appeared in the doorway, wearing one of my shirts, oversized, effortless, a ghost of the woman I thought I knew. You work too much, she murmured, yawning. Come to bed. In a minute. She lingered for a heartbeat, watching me. You're quiet these days. Yeah, I said softly. I've had a lot on my mind. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes, and turned away. Don't stay up too late, soldier, she teased, disappearing into the dark hallway. The door shut upstairs, and silence wrapped around me again. I exhaled, then reopened the files. There were emails between Patricia and a district attorney, all marked off the record. From Patricia Walsh, my son has been through enough. You know what needs to be done. From DA Ronald Carver, understood. File will be reclassified as a sealed investigation. The officer involved will receive a transfer. Attached beneath the chain was an internal memo from the police department recommending Officer Derek Haynes for reassignment to rural jurisdiction, just one day after he wrote the original DUI report. I leaned back, my jaw tightening. I remembered meeting Patricia for the first time, her firm handshake, the unblinking confidence of someone used to absolute control. She'd looked me in the eye and said, "You'll take care of my daughter, won't you?" I promised I would. And now I realized I'd walked my wife straight into the shadow of a dynasty that crushed anyone who threatened it. I needed air. I stepped out onto the porch, the night cool and heavy with mist. The neighborhood slept oblivious. Streetlights cast pale halos over the wet asphalt. 15 years. 15 years of love, trust, children, all balanced on the foundation of lies her family had built. I whispered to myself, "How deep does it go, Rebecca?" The truth was a living thing now, breathing down my neck. And for the first time, I wasn't sure what scared me more, their corruption or the part of me that wanted to burn it all down. The next morning, I called in sick. I told my assistant Jared to cancel meetings and work from my study instead. But I wasn't working. I was cataloging. Every file, every message, every document, organized, encrypted, and duplicated. I labeled folders with surgical precision. Evidence, affair evidence, fraud evidence, cover up at the center of it all, one master file. Walsh family corruption. Do not open unless necessary. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Ethan Morrison. Rebecca says you're not feeling well. Need anything? I stared at the text, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. You'll need a good lawyer soon. I want to type. Instead, I replied, I'm fine. Then I turned the phone off. That evening, I printed the most damning evidence and sealed it in a heavy brown envelope. Across the front, in black marker, I wrote one word. Insurance. Inside were copies of the affair's photos and recordings, Ethan's offshore transfer trail, Patricia's email exchanges with the DA, the 2011 police report and payment records. It was enough to destroy all of them, Rebecca, her mother, her father, her brother. I slid the envelope into the hidden compartment of my office safe, right beside a secondary copy stored on an encrypted flash drive taped beneath my desk. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and stared at the fire flickering in the hearth. What kind of man had I become? A decade ago, I'd have believed that justice belonged in courts, not in revenge. But this wasn't justice anymore. This was survival. The front door opened around 7. Rebecca walked in, smiling like nothing had changed. Hey, she said, setting down her purse. You didn't go to work? Just needed a day, I said calmly. She walked over, brushed my shoulder. You sure you're okay? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the faint flicker of deceit beneath her soft expression. The woman I'd loved for 15 years was now a stranger wearing her face. Yeah, I murmured. I'm fine. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and went upstairs. I watched her go, my expression unreadable. Later that night, I added a note to the envelope, handwritten, precise, and final. If anything happens to me, intentional or otherwise, deliver these contents to the FBI, the press, and every major news outlet. The truth will not die with me. I folded the note, slipped it inside, and locked the safe. As the latch clicked shut, I realized something had changed inside me. I wasn't chasing revenge. Not yet. But if they came for me, if they tried to destroy my name, my business, my family, I would detonate that truth like a bomb. I poured another glass, staring out the window into the dark horizon. Somewhere out there, the Walsh family slept soundly, believing their secrets were untouchable. But I knew better, because now I held the truth, their real legacy, and it was heavy enough to bury them all. Chapter 6, Served at Work. The afternoon sun poured through the glass walls of Reynolds Security Solutions, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The hum of computers, the low murmur of voices, and the faint rhythm of typing filled the open office. It was another day in the empire I had built from scratch, precise, orderly, disciplined. But beneath that calm, I was waiting. I knew this day would come. For weeks, I'd felt the storm circling. The hushed phone calls Rebecca took on the balcony, the sudden financial withdrawals, the legal whispers echoing through contacts I'd long ago learned to keep quiet. The enemy always moves before the battle begins. So when my secretary buzzed the intercom and said, "Mr. Reynolds, there's a man here to see you. Says he's from Morrison and Tate Law," I felt the faintest flicker of a smile. "Showtime. Send him in," I said, my voice even. The glass door swung open, and in walked a man who looked like he'd been cut from arrogance itself. Early 40s, slick black hair, an expensive navy suit that tried too hard, and a smirk that screamed superiority. He carried a leather briefcase, polished to a mirror shine. "Mr. Reynolds," he said smoothly, offering a hand he didn't mean. "Thomas Grayson. I represent your wife, Rebecca Reynolds." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Ah, so you're that guy." He gave a short laugh, rehearsed and condescending. "I suppose I am. And today, I'm here on behalf of my client with some, well, unfortunate news." He placed a stack of papers on my desk with deliberate ceremony, sliding them forward as though presenting a royal decree. The header glared in bold type. "Petition for divorce." I didn't touch them. I didn't need to. "Rebecca has decided," Grayson continued, "that your marriage is irreparably broken. She's seeking dissolution, full custody of Connor and Madison, and, of course, primary ownership of marital assets, including your company." He paused, smiling like a man who'd just delivered a knockout punch. "It's all very standard, Mr. Reynolds. Your wife's been quite generous, really. She's not asking for everything, just what she deserves." I said nothing. He mistook my silence for weakness. "They always do. Frankly," he said, leaning forward with mock sympathy, "you should be thankful she's not pressing for punitive damages. She's provided statements, quite persuasive ones, about your temperament, your control and behavior. Even your children have spoken to a child psychologist. They expressed a preference to remain with her." He gave a small, smug shrug. "Your children don't even want your name anymore." For a moment, the words echoed in the stillness. My assistant glanced through the glass from across the hall, sensing tension. I lifted one hand, just a calm gesture. "Everything's fine." Then I looked back at the lawyer. "You done?" He blinked. "Excuse me." I rose slowly from my chair, adjusting the cuff of my shirt. I asked if you're done with your speech. "Because if you are, I've got work to get back to." Grayson smirked again. "You don't seem to understand the gravity of this, Mr. Reynolds. Once this is filed, oh, I understand perfectly," I said, my tone cool as steel. "You're delivering a message. But I've got one for your client, too." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a heavy, sealed brown envelope, thick, crisp, and unmarked except for a small printed label on the corner. "To be handed to Mrs. Rebecca Walsh Reynolds, confidential." Grayson frowned. "What's this?" I stepped around the desk, closing the distance between us. "An equal exchange," I said quietly. "Deliver that to your client. Personally." He took the envelope slowly, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "What's inside?" I smiled, Not the warm kind, but the ones soldiers wear when they know they've already won. Let's just say it's a collection of truths, ones your client forgot to include in her paperwork. His brow furrowed. Are you threatening my client, Mr. Reynolds? I chuckled softly. No, Mr. Grayson. I don't make threats. I make sure people understand the consequences of their actions. You'll find that distinction useful in your line of work. He bristled. Try to regain control. You realize any attempt to intimidate. I cut him off. No. That envelope is her salvation, if she's smart enough to see it that way. But if she's not, I shrugged, meeting his gaze evenly. Well, let's just say by this time tomorrow, several federal offices and media outlets will receive packages from me. Identical ones. Grayson blinked. His jaw twitched just slightly. The arrogance in his posture faltered. I turned and walked back to my desk. You want to move quickly, I said, sitting down. Time-sensitive material. He hesitated, clearly thrown off balance. You can't. What exactly is in there? Evidence, I said simply, opening my laptop and resuming my typing. But you don't need to know that. You're just a messenger, right? He stood there for several seconds, shifting his weight. The confidence that had filled the room when he walked in had evaporated. All that remained was uncertainty. Mr. Reynolds, he began again. This meeting's over, I said quietly, not looking up. You've done your job. Now, go do the next part. Deliver the envelope. Then pray your client listens before the clock runs out. For a moment, there was only silence, the faint ticking of the office clock, the hum of air conditioning, the rhythm of my fingers on the keyboard. Then he cleared his throat awkwardly. Fine. I'll see that it's delivered. Good, I said, glancing up briefly. Oh, and Mr. Grayson? He paused at the door. Yes. Tell Rebecca, I said, my voice dropping into something calm and deadly certain. She should have remembered who she married. The lawyer's Adam's apple bobbed. He nodded stiffly, then turned and left without another word. I watched through the glass wall as he crossed the main floor, his posture slightly hunched now. My employees looked up, curious, sensing the tension. Grayson didn't meet anyone's eyes. When the door closed behind him, the room felt lighter. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Everything all right, boss? Jared asked from the doorway. Perfectly, I said. Just business. He nodded uncertainly and left. The rest of the afternoon passed like a slow burn. I reviewed contracts, made calls, and scheduled meetings, all with the same composure, as if my life hadn't just been declared a legal war zone. But inside, a quiet satisfaction pulsed. They'd made their move, clean, confident, and arrogant. And now I'd made mine. Rebecca thought she held all the cards. The children, the lawyers, the influence of her powerful parents. She'd forgotten something fundamental. I was trained to dismantle systems from within. When Grayson's car pulled away from the parking lot, I watched through the office window. The envelope sat on his passenger seat, catching a sliver of sunlight. By the time it reached her hands, she'd know everything. That her affair wasn't secret anymore. That her financial crimes were documented, and that the cover-up her family buried 14 years ago could see daylight with one click. I turned back to my desk, opened a fresh document, and began typing notes for the next day's operations. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. Outside, the storm clouds were gathering again, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Chapter 7, The Collapse. The phone rang at 8:12 a.m., a sharp, urgent tone that cut through the quiet hum of my office. I picked it up without checking the caller ID, already knowing who it would be. Carter Reynolds? The voice was tight, controlled, trembling just beneath the surface. Speaking, I said, my tone casual, almost bored. This is Patricia Walsh. I paused, letting the silence stretch for a heartbeat. She didn't fill it. She couldn't. Carter, what have you done? I leaned back in my chair, feet resting lightly on the polished floor. Done, I echoed, slowly. What do you mean, done? Her voice cracked. You know everything. All of it. You compiled it. All the files, the recordings, correct. I said evenly. And I've made them available. But only under specific conditions. Her breathing quickened. Conditions? Carter, listen, this isn't just about your divorce. My career, my family, everything is at stake. I'm aware, I replied, which is why I called. Let's avoid unnecessary collateral damage. I'm prepared to resolve this cleanly, if your family is willing to cooperate. The line went quiet. She whispered, almost to herself, I've failed as a mother. Not yet, I said softly. It's salvageable, but only if certain actions are taken immediately. She gasped. What are you asking? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. Another number. Another crisis. Carter, the voice of Senator Raymond Walsh boomed, authority cracking through the line. Sit down. Now, I want an explanation. I'm sitting, I said, leaning back in the chair I had grown accustomed to calling my throne. Do you have any idea what you've unleashed? He demanded. This is political suicide. Depends on how you handle it, I said flatly. Your influence can help resolve this quietly, or we can make it very public. Public? He barked a laugh that tried to mask panic. Do you know who I am? You can't threaten me. I didn't rise to the bait. I'm not threatening. I'm giving you a choice. Actions, consequences. Simple. The line went silent again. I could feel his pulse racing through the speaker. Then came another message, a text from Ethan Morrison. Drop it, or you'll regret it. I know people. You have no idea who you're messing with. I replied calmly. I have everything, Ethan. Your moves are transparent. One wrong step, and it's over. You can leave France, but the FBI will still find you. Within minutes, the text reply arrived. This isn't over. You won't get away with this. I placed the phone down, unshaken. Their fear was palpable, thin, delicate, raw. Then, just as I was reviewing the final batch of evidence one last time, a soft chime, the video call from Rebecca. I answered. Her face appeared on the screen, pale, red-rimmed eyes. She looked as if she hadn't slept in days. Carter, she said in a tremulous whisper. Please, I need to talk to you. Can we please? I studied her. The woman who had once commanded my heart now looked small, fragile, and desperate. But I didn't flinch. My eyes were steady, my posture relaxed. Calmness was a weapon sharper than any blade I had ever held. Of course, I said, but you know the context. This isn't a casual conversation. Her lips quivered. I didn't think you'd find out. Ethan, my parents, I thought we were safe. You forgot one thing, I said softly, leaning forward, my hands folded on the desk. I never miss patterns. You've left traces everywhere. Videos, emails, bank transfers, even the buried Walsh family secrets. I know what your family did in 2011. Timothy's accident. The cover-up. I know every piece. She gasped, her hands trembling against her cheeks. How? How could you know about that? I allowed a small, controlled smile. I watched, I tracked, I listened. And now, I'm in full possession of the truth. Her face went pale. Carter, you can't do this. I already have, I said quietly. And you've already lost control. Her lips parted, words failing her. Then she broke, sobbing openly. Please, I'll do anything. I'll sign whatever you want. Just don't destroy us. I remained calm. Good. Let's be precise. First, full custody of Connor and Madison remains with me. You signed the agreement today. Her sniffles filled the room. Yes, I'll sign. Second, I continued, my voice unwavering. Patricia Walsh resigns from the bench. Immediately. The public record must reflect it. Rebecca swallowed hard. She'll do it. I'll tell her. And Senator Walsh, I said,